title of this lesson is The Church in the 21st Century. Now, we're living here in the 20th century, but we've got some prophecies. We've got some things to talk about the way we feel the church is developing, some changes that are being made, and I guess that maybe I have a right to some ideas because I've traveled through so many states and so many places and taught in so many churches that I can see what's happening. Now, a lot of folks stay, maybe perhaps one church, and they see what's happening there, but my wife Betty and I have a chance to travel all over the United States, and we perhaps if we've forgotten how to count how many churches we've been in. So we've seen some changes, and we've seen some things happening in our own lifetime that we can predict will be happening in the future. So the message today is the church in the 21st century. Now, perhaps this would be a good time to introduce my reader. This is Bob Dorn. Over here to my left, Bob will be doing the reading for most of the things that we have to say. And Bob has got the right kind of a Bible. It's the King James Bible, the one Jesus used. All right. And one of the things we want to talk about right now is Revelation chapter 22. Now, from Genesis to Revelation, and the 22nd chapter, that's the end of the book. And the end of the book of Revelation, you'll find the church is still there. Now, I'm going to say that again. At the very end of the book of Revelation, the church is still there. Some people have gotten the idea that maybe the church will be gone. But the truth of the matter is, the church is there in chapter 22. And so, over the years, we've come to the idea that maybe this rapture idea that we've been taught for so long might be just an idea. And perhaps the church has a destiny, greater destiny, on the face of this earth. The kings and priests said, "We shall rule and reign on the earth." And so many scriptures have to do with the fact that we're going to be here during all of these times when things are changing here on the earth. Now, it is true that we were taught that our goal was to live a good Christian life and to die an honorable death and cross Jordan's chilly waters and go to heaven. And I'm not finding fault with that idea because it's the idea the church has taught for, 2,000 years. But there is a generation that's going to have a different idea. And that generation will say, just a minute now, our goal is not to die and go to heaven, but our goal is to live and love and bring heaven to earth. And rather than us going over there, the idea is for that heavenly thing to come here. And that's what we're on tonight. So we're talking first about Revelation in chapter 22 and the fact that the church is here and it is not raptured. Also, one other thing we do want to talk about in the book of Revelation is that there's a divergent thing between the bride and the harlot. Now, the bride is over there in chapter 19 and the harlot chapter 17 in the book of Revelation. And these are parallel events. And what I mean by parallel, in the book of Revelation, we found that there are parallel sections for everything, for the first half to the second half. And when it tells a story in the book of Revelation, it could be like in the first half, it'll be a heavenly view. But when it's talking about the earthly view of the same event, it'll be in the last half of the book of Revelation. Now, if that didn't make sense, you want to get our book about the book of Revelation. It's called The Key to the book of Revelation. I want to have one more little note here and make some adjustments here on the set. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 of the book of Revelation are a picture of the church. And chapter 12 is a picture of the church. But chapter 1, 2, and 3 is the heavenly view of the church. And chapter 12 is the earthly view of the very same thing. Now, we've been talking about the church. And we are the church. We are the Bible calls us the ecclesia. They call that once. So we're not talking about a building. We're not talking about brick and mortar. We're talking about people. We are the church. In fact, the church met here tonight, in the Church of Fredericksburg met here tonight, whereas this building isn't always dedicated to this kind of a thing. Nonetheless, the people are, because we are the church. That's what we want to get across right now. Now, when we talk about the future of the church, there are two main things that I want to call your attention to. But first, we'll talk about the 12th chapter and the sun-clothed woman. You remember about a woman who's clothed with the sun, and she's standing on the moon. And she has a crown. Let's see, how many stars were in that crown? 12. And with the 12 stars there, and this woman is a... well, read about her, Bob, in the sun-clothed woman in Revelation 12, and start with verse 1, and we'll just have a few things together like this, and we'll just see if this mic will pick it up good enough, and if not, why, we'll make some adjustments. Go ahead, Bob.
And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into...
We'll stop right there for a minute, Bob, because that'll kind of end that thought, and then we can move on from there. First, I think that all Bible teachers everywhere agree that the sun-clothed woman is the church. And she has a destiny from way back there at 33 A.D., and we see her at the church, and sometimes we might call it something else, might call it Bride of Christ, whatever. But the church is not only referred to back in 33 A.D., but even up into our time. And we're going to find out that the church is here on the earth up to the very last chapter of the book of Revelation. But I'm going to tell you ahead of time what I really want to prove, and then you can look at it later and see whether or not it's so. We cannot find anything in the Bible that would indicate that the church has a destiny to rule and reign. No. Actually, it's different. The destiny of the church is to be pregnant. The purpose of the church is to bring forth that man-child. Now, the man-child is that part of prophecy spoken of in the book of Revelation that is going to rule over all the nations. It's a rod of iron, and it's not the church. And this is what we're trying to emphasize, because there is a conflict about, in the ideas of many people, and many people even today, politically, who knows, different ways, think that the church should rule and reign over our society. But if you'll study the Bible, it doesn't say that, and it never does indicate that the church has a ruling and reigning position. Her purpose is to be pregnant and to bring forth this man-child. Now, the man-child, then, because the man-child comes from the church, the man-child is a part of the church, but the man-child is taken up to be nourished by the Father. Now, that's an interesting concept, too, because most babies are nourished by the mother. But when we study about this man-child is nourished by the Father. When we study the names of God in the Bible, and we can call them El Elyon, Yahweh, El Shaddai, Elohim, and Eloah, these 5 names of God represent 5 natures of God. The one God with 5 different names, or 5 named natures. And one of those names, El Shaddai or El Shaddai, has to do with the large-breasted or multi-breasted one, referred to, or at least translated in our Bible, as the Almighty, when we find that word Almighty in the Old Testament. Now when we go to the Almighty in the New Testament, there's a translation error that we'll just have to point out like that and leave it for now. But the word Almighty in the New Testament is not the same as the Almighty in the Old Testament. So you'll want to remember that and put that into perspective. Now the El Shaddai, or El Shaddai, is that named nature of God that nourishes, that provides, the breasted or multi-breasted God. And then this son, this what we call the man-child, is taken to receive nourishment from the Father. And this may be surprising, not the mother. And when we realize the mother's the church, then we begin to see something. The purpose of the church is to bring forth life. But when that life is now brought forth, there will be those who, as members of the, we'll say family, church family, who are what we might call crown prince. They have a destiny to rule. But within the same kingdom, we have the prince and the princess and people like that, and their destiny is not to rule. I'll say that again. Their destiny is to be a courtier to the queen. And so in this realm, we want to call your attention to the fact that there are many, many people in our Christian society whose destiny is to be a courtier in the queen's court, as opposed to a crown prince who is being trained to take over the kingdom someday. Now, I'm calling your attention to these divisions mainly because I don't think that we learn these divisions in Sunday school, do we? We haven't seen that kind of talk or that kind of thinking in our Sunday school classes, because generally speaking, within a Sunday school class, the idea is our church, our denomination is the biggest, the best, we're going to amount to something. In the rapture, we'll be the ones that go and the others will be let, whatever. And I don't know about you, but in the realm that I was in, we actually thought that we would be the ones that would be taken, and we worried about the rest of you in your denominations. But we laugh about it now, and I hope that it's funny. It may be a little more tragic than funny. But those days are over, and we're seeing some things that we didn't see before. So the purpose or the destiny of this child, then, is to rule all nations. Now, the candlestick in the book of Revelation is that seven-branched candlestick, and it's called the seven spirits or the seven branches, or you can call it whatever you want to call. But the idea is that the candlestick is here with us for a long, long time, even to the end of the book of Revelation. Now, as the woman fled to the wilderness, and we're ready now, Bob, for you to pick up and start with verse 6 and read some more about the destiny of this woman.
And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony. And they loved not their lives unto the death.
Now we're going to stop here and go back and just repeat verse 9, would you please, for emphasis?
And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him.
Now we find four synonymous terms: great dragon, old serpent, devil, and Satan. They're all synonymous for the same thing, that evil destroying power. We find that he's cast out. And when he's cast out, according to the verse 10, four things occur. What are those four things, Bob? Do you remember those four things? Well, let me give it to you. Well, go ahead. You got it.
Okay. Now has come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ.
There are the four things. Now, these result from the casting out of that old serpent, the devil or Satan. And this is what we want to emphasize right now. In order to have salvation, strength, kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ, the power of his anointing, in other words, Christ means anointing. In order to have those operational in our life, we have to cast out. We have to get rid of him, casting down, remove him from having any influence in the church. Now, I think that we're going to have to admit that even though Jesus saw the devil cast down, we're going to have to admit that the devil still exercises influence in the church. We sometimes really don't want to admit it, but it's a fact, and if we don't admit it, we're going to just lose the whole concept or the whole idea of things. All right, now let's talk about what is it that has to be cast out of our lives. And as we think about this casting out of our lives, we want to now identify what the Bible says. So, Bob, I think you're ready. Go over there to that our favorite in John 5:45. And in John 5:45, it'll tell us who it is who is the accuser of the brethren. It says the accuser of the brethren is cast out, which accused us before God day and night. And we're going to have to admit that the accuser of the brethren has to be cast out of your life. It has to be cast out of the church, has to be cast out of all of our interrelationships. Bob, if Jesus told us the name of the accuser of the brother, I think you and I would both agree that Jesus was right, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and tell him.
Do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. There is one that accuses you, even Moses, in whom ye trust.
Now think of that for a minute. Just think of that for a minute. We had the idea that Moses was going to lead us to God. But the truth of the matter is, the law of Moses is a schoolmaster that leads us to what? Say it. Somebody say it. A schoolmaster that leads us to Christ. See, the law of Moses, the schoolmaster that leads us to Christ, has to be removed after we come to Christ. And that's something that's so hard for the church to grasp, because the church wants to stay under the control of the schoolmaster even after they're grown, even after they're married, even after they're grown up and have children of their own. You see, there's something about that, the security of being told what to do by those, what we call 613 Moses commandments. And so we find that that has to be adjusted, that has to be changed. The mind of the people have to come into Jesus and Jesus only. When we see Jesus and only Jesus, then that'll give us the answer as to what it is that's holding us back. See, the church isn't amounting to everything that it should yet. And the reason for that is the church is still trying to walk with one foot in the Old Testament and the other foot in the New Testament. Still trying to find favor with God by what Moses said and find favor with God by what Jesus said. And that's not going to work. The church of the 21st century is going to come out of that idea. The church of the 21st century is going to be able to operate in what Jesus said and not necessarily in what Moses said. But when you look at my Bible, you'll discover that there are just as many verses underlined in the Old Testament as there are in the New. And the reason for that is Not that I live in the Old Testament to find direction for my life. No, I get that from the New Testament. But I study the Old Testament so I can understand what the New Testament is talking about. Because, you see, when I'm studying the Old Testament, then it gives me the patterns. It gives me what the Bible refers to as types and shadows of that which is then brought forth in the truth of the New Testament. And that's what we're going to have to realize, that our goal is to use the Old Testament and study the Old Testament, but not be directed by Moses and the laws, the 613, what the Bible refers to as Tesava commands. The Greek word for that is in Ptolemai, are the commands that Jesus gave us versus the commands that Moses gave us. Now, Bob, would you pick up with verse 13 now and fill out what happens as this woman, I'm sorry, back to Revelation, Bob. And I'm in Revelation 12, verse 13 for a moment. I threw him a curve there. We were still in John, but that didn't work all the way. Go ahead.
All right. Starting at verse 13?
Yeah, the persecution.
And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood.
Bob, just a minute. Hold that thought. The water, the woman. Go over to 17. Chapter 17. And find out some more about this water.
All right.
It'll tell you what that is. (17:1).
And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication.
Now this is waters, and the whore sitting on them. Go to 15 now, and read 15. Verse 15, sorry, 17:15. And it'll tell you about those waters.
And he saith unto me, The waters which thou sawest where the whore sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues.
Now we got something here. Now we can do with this. Now let's go back over here. And the serpent spitting out, now that would be in 12:15. Do it again now.
And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood.
Now what's coming out of his mouth? Water, that's what it says, but the waters which thou sawest are many nations, multitudes, kingdoms, people, don't you see? Like you've heard the expression, I saw a sea of faces, right? Waters, people. So then, what is Satan using in the church to dilute the church? You got it, people. And I hope that this is starting to make a little sense to you. You see, just because people are members of the church doesn't mean that they're Christians. Now think of that for a minute. Within that society, the devil is putting other kinds of people to make decisions for the church. And don't you know that's what led to the Dark Ages? Because the people that were in the church, the people that were making the decisions for the church weren't really Christians. I hope that's making sense to you, you see. And it's the devil that's doing this. He's spitting these people out of his mouth and to dilute the influence of the church. And you know that if the church would have made decisions that would have been oriented toward Christian principles for the last 2,000 years, we'd be a lot further along than we are today. I think everybody will admit that. So then we see a paradox here. We see a church that's not made up, or we'll say it another way, that is diluted and is not really doing its whole job or its whole destiny or its whole purpose, because it's got people in it who join for perhaps social reasons, who join for family reasons. We all know that. I don't have to go through a whole list of those things, but everybody has known and seen different situations with that nature. Now, these people then are in the church and controlling the church, but they don't really help the destiny of the church. Now, Bob, give me 16, verse 16, 12:16.
And the earth helped the woman.
Now, let's do that again. And the earth helped the woman. Now, let's think of that for a minute. What can the earth do? Well, read just a little bit more, because I preempted that thought. Go ahead.
And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth.
That's what I should have talked about. The earth then swallows that flood of people and gets, in a sense, gets rid of them, keeping their influence from overwhelming the church, but definitely adding their influence to it without overwhelming it. Oh, that's hard to say. Did that come across? Did you understand what I said? They're there, their influence is there, but they're not overwhelming the church. The church still has a destiny. This unclothed woman, and her destiny is to be pregnant and to bring forth more and more and more. In fact, as we study the types and shadows, we find that this woman, her whole purpose is to, well, I would have to say, have altar calls, have a nursery, to cause people to be born again, born into the kingdom. And that's one reason that I kind of like Billy Graham, or any kind of what you might call evangelical purpose. And I would tend to want to support an evangelical movement, because that's what happens. They cause the people to be born. A pregnancy, you know, when I say born, that means pregnant. Something's happening along that line. And that's the way it should be. That's what's happening. The destiny is to be pregnant. But if we get the wrong idea and think that the destiny of the church is to rule and reign, then we'll mess it up, because those who are brought forth from the church, who are born because of a relationship that the church then provides, we'll say a plant or an organ and an altar and an evangelist and so forth, and the people come in and they get saved. Out of that group that gets saved, a percentage, a part of that group called a remnant, or we could call them sons of God, or manifest sons, different words that the Bible uses. Those people have a destiny to rule and reign. But there will be others born at the same altar, so to speak, whose destiny is to stay with the mother, to nourish the mother, and provide for the mother. As this lesson develops and we get into the tabernacle of David, you're going to see the very same idea of a group that is really there for the purpose of providing for the church, rather than being trained to rule and reign. And I hope that's making sense. Now,